People say marriage comes with its challenges, but no one prepares you for marrying into a battlefield. From day one, my mother-in-law made it clear I wasn't good enough. Not for her son, not for her family, and certainly not to be called wife. Alina, women in my day had children by their first anniversary. She'd say, watching me scrub the floor she purposely walked across with muddy shoes. But some women just come to eat and decorate. She never shouted, she didn't have to. Her weapons were comparison, humiliation, and constant reminders that I was a disappointment. She told anyone who would listen that I was barren. 4 years and nothing, maybe she's cursed. Jason, my husband, never defended me. He'd stare at the floor or change the subject. When I cried, he called me sensitive. I started to believe maybe it was all my fault. I tried, God knows I tried. Hospitals, prayers, herbal teas, every tradition and treatment recommended. Every month I hoped, and every month my heart broke again. Still I got up, cooked, cleaned, served, smiled. But behind closed doors, I cried in silence. When guests came, Mrs. Barlow would smile wide and say, "She's trying, but still no child, we keep praying." They'd nod, pity me, and change the topic. I'd stand in the kitchen, pretending not to hear every word. What hurt the most wasn't her words. It was the silence from Jason. The man who once promised to protect me had slowly become a shadow beside his mother's voice. I stayed because I believed things would change. But deep down, I think I knew. She was never going to stop until I broke. The tension in the house became something you could feel in your bones. Mrs. Barlow grew colder by the day. Her comments sharpened. Her stares lingered longer. And Jason, he was barely present, always working late. Always tired, always distant. I began to eat alone. She stopped setting a place for me at the table. And when I quietly brought it up, she replied, "If you want to eat like a wife, first act like one, give us a child." I said nothing, there was no point. She didn't want answers, just control. One afternoon, I came home from a doctor's visit to find a younger woman sitting on the couch. Pretty, polite, laughing with Mrs. Barlow. "Oh, Alina," my mother-in-law smiled sweetly. "Meet Kioma, she's Pastor Kelech's niece. Visiting, lovely girl." Kioma looked up. She didn't know I was being humiliated. She just smiled and said hello. I forced a smile back and walked into the kitchen. Later, I overheard Mrs. Barlow say, "Some women were born to carry legacy, others just take up space." Jason said nothing. That night, I cried quietly, facing the wall. Jason lay beside me, scrolling through his phone. I wanted him to ask how the appointment went. I wanted him to fight for me, just once. He didn't. Instead, he sighed, rolled over, and whispered, "Maybe we need to start thinking differently. Maybe we weren't meant to be." My heart dropped. It was no longer just his mother. It was him too. I realized then that the storm I feared wasn't coming. I was already in it. I stopped trying after that night. Stopped hoping Jason would speak up. Stopped begging for space at a table where I was never truly welcome. I moved through the house like a shadow, silent, unnoticed, and slowly disappearing. Mrs. Barlow, on the other hand, was thriving. She started humming in the mornings, smiling more, even redecorated the guest room, claiming it was for when visitors come. But I knew better. She was preparing for someone new. Jason barely looked me in the eye. When he did, it was with pity. Not love, not guilt, just pity. I tried to keep my dignity intact. Woke up early. Cooked, cleaned, played the role. But I felt it in my bones. I was already being replaced. Then one day, I came home early from the market and overheard a conversation in the living room. "She'll leave soon," Mrs. Barlow whispered. "She has nothing holding her here. Then you can finally be free." Jason's response, silence. Not disagreement, not defense, just silence. I stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding. They had already decided. That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and whispered to myself, "You deserve better." But I didn't believe it, not yet. I climbed into bed beside a man who no longer saw me, and I waited for the moment when they'd finally say the words. The moment I'd be forced to face what I already knew. There was no room left for me in this house. Not in their hearts. Not in their future, and certainly not in their family. It happened on a Thursday. I came home from a doctor's visit, alone, again, and found my suitcase by the door. Neatly packed, shoes paired, zip closed like it had been waiting for me. Mrs. Barlow stood beside it, arms folded. Jason sat on the couch, head down, like a child being scolded. I blinked, what is this? Mrs. Barlow didn't flinch. "You've overstayed your welcome." My heart thudded. "Excuse me. You've had 4 years, Alina. 4 years of prayers, fasting, doctors, patience, and still, no child, no progress. it's time to face reality. I turned to Jason. Say something. He didn't. He just looked at the wall like it held all the answers. He didn't have the courage to speak. You're letting her do this? I asked, voice shaking. His silence said it all. Mrs. Barlow stepped closer. We need someone who can carry this family forward. You've tried, but now it's time to step aside. I couldn't move, couldn't cry. My hands trembled, my heart cracked, but I still stood there. Then she opened the door, just like that. Go to your sisters, take time. Heal, but don't come back unless you have something to bring. Jason didn't stop her. I bent down slowly, picked up my suitcase and walked to the threshold. The house felt colder than I'd ever known. I didn't look back. As the door shut behind me, a part of me shattered, but another part awakened. Because as I stepped into the street with nowhere to go, I heard a voice deep inside say, "This is not your ending." Nina didn't ask questions when I showed up at her door. Suitcase in hand, eyes swollen and heart heavy. She hugged me like only a sister could, tight. Wordless, warm, I broke down in her arms. For days I barely spoke. I slept, cried and stared at the ceiling. Everything felt numb. Until I woke up one morning, with nausea so intense I couldn't stand. Probably stress, Nina said, handing me ginger tea. But I knew it was different. The next day, the dizziness returned. My breasts ached, I couldn't eat. And then I realized I hadn't seen my period in weeks. Still, I didn't want to hope. Nina drove me to a small clinic across town, somewhere far from the whispers and pity. The nurse smiled gently as she handed me the test. Let's see what's going on, dear. 10 minutes later, she returned, holding the strip like it was gold. Congratulations, she said softly. You're pregnant. My world stilled. Are you sure? I whispered. Her smile widened. Very sure. But I'd like to do a scan. Your hormone levels are quite high. I followed her in silence, heart pounding. Then I saw it on the monitor. Not one, not two, but 3 tiny flickers. Like fireflies dancing in the dark. Triplets, the nurse said, her voice full of awe. You're carrying triplets. My breath caught, my throat tightened. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not from fear, not confusion, but power. The same womb they called cursed was carrying 3 lives. The same woman they threw out in shame was now the one carrying legacy. And I smiled for the first time in weeks. Because I wasn't empty. I was full of life. I walked out of that clinic, holding the printout of my scan like it was sacred. 3 heartbeats. 3 tiny lives growing inside me. It was everything I had prayed for. And yet, I told no one. Not even Nina. I wasn't ready. This wasn't just a pregnancy, it was proof. Proof that I was never broken. That I had been judged too quickly. Too cruelly. But I didn't want my joy tainted by their shock. Their sudden apologies or their guilt. This blessing was mine, and for now, I wanted to protect it like a fragile flame. I tucked the scan into my journal, hid the vitamins in my handbag, and smiled through the morning sickness. Nina noticed I was eating differently, sleeping more, holding my stomach sometimes when I thought no one was looking. You're okay, she asked one evening. I nodded, I'm just healing. And I was, slowly, quietly. Each day, I whispered to the little lives inside me, telling them how much they were wanted, how deeply loved they already were, how strong their mother would become for them. I began to dream again. I sketched out baby names, imagined holding them, feeding them, watching them crawl, then walk, then grow into the kind of joy that no one could take from me. The world had tried to define me by what I lacked, but now I carried what they never believed I could. And I knew when the time came, I wouldn't have to scream or explain or prove anything. My presence would be the proof. Until then, I would carry my hope in silence and let it grow. It started with a whisper at the pharmacy. A neighbor from our old street spotted me buying prenatal vitamins. She didn't say anything, just stared too long. Eyes wide, lips pressed into a knowing smile. By the time I reached home, I had a message waiting from Jason. Are you okay? I hadn't heard from him since the night they pushed me out. I didn't reply. The next day, Nina came home with news. Jason came by the church, she said slowly. People are talking, Alina. They say you're glowing. That you were seen rubbing your stomach. I stayed quiet, sipping my tea. Nina sat beside me. You're not hiding anymore, are you? I glanced down at my stomach. The bump was no longer a secret. It peeked through my clothes now, small but undeniable. No, I said, I'm done hiding. Later that evening, the knock came. Jason. He looked thinner, less sure of himself. He stood at the doorway, eyes darting between me and my belly. So it's true, he said, voice barely a whisper. I nodded, I'm pregnant. His lips trembled, and it's mine. I folded my arms. You threw me out without even asking. Now you want answers. Elena, I didn't know. I was wrong, we were wrong. I looked him in the eye steady, calm. Jason, I begged for your voice when I was being torn down in that house. But you chose silence. And now that I carry what your family claimed I never could, suddenly you remember me. He said nothing, because deep down he knew. The life they wanted so desperately now existed, but it would grow without them. 3 days passed after Jason's visit. Then she came. Mrs. Barlow. Nina opened the door and there she stood, wrapped in a faded shawl, her pride replaced by something unfamiliar. Regret. Elena, she said softly, wringing her hands. Please, I need to talk to you. I stood behind Nina, arms folded, belly visible now beneath my dress. Her eyes went straight to it, and she gasped. They told me, but I didn't believe. She took a shaky breath. Triplets. I nodded. Tears welled in her eyes. The same eyes that once glared at me with contempt. Elena, I was cruel. I let my bitterness blind me. I was wrong, so wrong. Please forgive me. I didn't speak. Jason appeared behind her, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in a week. Elena, we made a terrible mistake. He said, we want you back, the house. It's not the same without you. I looked at them both. The same people who once labeled me barren, worthless. Now they were begging. And part of me wanted to say, you don't deserve this miracle. But the other part, the stronger part, knew I didn't want to live with bitterness. I forgive you, I said quietly. Relief flooded their faces. But I'm not coming back, I added. Their smiles faded. Elena, Jason whispered. No, I said firmly. I'll raise these children in peace. Not in a house where I was once thrown out like nothing. Mrs. Barlow wiped her eyes. Can we at least be part of their lives? I met her gaze. We'll see, time will tell. Because forgiveness isn't forgetting. And just because I released them from my pain, doesn't mean I was ever returning to it. The nursery wasn't fancy, just soft-colored walls, borrowed cribs, and hand-painted letters spelling hope, grace, and joy. My girls, born on a rainy Tuesday, early, but healthy. 3 tiny miracles with identical wails and different personalities from day one. Nina cried more than I did in the delivery room. She held my hand through every contraction and whispered, You did it, Elena, you did it. The first time I held all 3, something shifted in me. The pain, the rejection, the humiliation. I felt it lose its grip. Not forgotten but powerless. These babies didn't just fill a void. They rewrote my story. Jason tried again. Sent gifts, cards, even letters. Mrs. Barlow called every few weeks. Asking to visit, I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. I needed to protect this peace I fought so hard for. I rocked Hope in one arm while watching Grace and Joy sleep. My heart full, my home full. And for the first time in years, I was full too. Not with fear, but with purpose. 6 months later, I stood outside the old house. The same gate, the same porch. But everything felt smaller. Jason had invited me for a family dedication. They wanted to honor the girls. Show gratitude, make things right. I came for closure, not for acceptance. I wore white, carried all 3 babies in their matching gowns. The entire street turned to stare as I walked through the gate they once forced me out of. Inside, the living room buzzed with family. Smiles, cameras, gifts, but none of it impressed me. They had celebrated my absence. Now they wanted to profit from my presence. After the short dedication prayer, Jason asked, So, what now? I kissed each of my daughters on the forehead and smiled. What now? I echoed. Now I go home to my home. They watched me leave again. But this time, I wasn't carrying shame. I was carrying legacy. And as I strapped my girls into their stroller, I looked up at the sky and whispered, Never again will I beg to belong.